Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bible Quest. We're glad to have you with us. With us tonight is Drew. Drew, how you doing?
I'm doing good, but I had to unmute my mic. Good to see you, Kenny. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Carl, how are you doing?
I'm doing better than Drew, apparently. I know how to unmute, so I think the cat had his tongue or something for a second.
I'm having a rough get-together. That's why I wanted Kenny to introduce it tonight, because I'm having a rough few minutes. Go
That's
ahead.
all right. The face you made was
Where we
good.
going, Kenny? What's going on?
Well, I think we're going to continue to jump into Mark 13 here tonight and keep going with our lessons. We encourage everyone to go back and watch the other episodes of this, but it's been really good. And Carl, take it away.
All right. Thanks, guys. We are looking at Mark 13, this text that most people think is talking about the end of the world. I've actually been teaching on it here locally as well, and the heading on some of our Bibles says Jesus predicts the end of the world or something like that. It's just crazy to see how, these translators, when they put together their versions of the Bible, they'll even go ahead and tell you what it's talking about without having read the text themselves, apparently.
Mine only said, mine doesn't say that. Mine does say the coming of the Son of Man. So that's ambiguous. That can go a couple of different ways.
Yeah, I appreciate it when they do that, when they actually just use the language that's in the text. But there are some that interpret it and say the end of the world instead of the end of the age. I'd be fine with even the end of the age, because that's what he says. So we're in the section, though, that starts to tighten up our context. We're talking about the importance of keeping everything in context. It's a conversation that Jesus had in private with 4 apostles, and that's already a tight context. But he's about to give them sort of an outer limit to when this is going to happen. And it's going to put a pretty big kibosh on what a lot of people are thinking this is about. It is not pertaining to things that are in our future or in our present, things that were pertaining to their generation. So let's jump into the reading. We're in Mark 13 tonight, picking up at verse 28. He has just given them the sign. They asked what sign there would be for this event to come and his coming with this event. And he told them it would be when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies. In Mark 13, he said, when the abomination of desolation is where he ought not to be. But we saw last time that Luke says that's Jerusalem surrounded by armies. So once he gives them the sign, he's going to tell them how to deal with it. And so we're going to pick up in 28 down through 32. I'm reading from the English Standard here.
Hold on a second. You're saying Mark 13?
Mark 13, 28 to 32.
Okay. Go right ahead.
All right. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. So there's at least 3 things in this short text that people latch on to and begin to say this is proof that this is a future event and it's the end of the world, but they have to yank it totally out of the context because he gives them a time frame here. First off,
not only does he give them a time frame, he says in verse 29, so also when you see these things taking place, you'll know that it is near. So those are signs that he says you'll see. And I'm going to keep going back to what Kenny keeps bringing up, although I'm beating him to it tonight. And that is when that final day and the end of the world comes, there will be no signs. Isn't that true, Kenny?
Yeah. But it's funny. Isn't it funny how they flip-flop on that? There's signs. But then when you say, well, isn't there no signs? The thief in the night. Well, yeah. But these are signs.
Yeah, these are signs that the thief in the night is on his way. What?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The language here just doesn't match up.
Right.
Yeah. So he did give them a sign because they asked for one, and it's an event that has a sign tied to it. It is the destruction of Jerusalem he's talking about. We've established that in the context here. So when the warning sign appears, when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, get out of Dodge. Flee and don't delay. Don't stick around. You guys know when a fig tree's ripe that summer's coming. You also know when the armies are coming around Jerusalem that you don't stick around Jerusalem. This is not the time to defend the temple. That's what he's saying. The temple is decreed for destruction. just like it was in the days of Jeremiah. Jeremiah said the same thing, and they called him a treasonous, false prophet, that he was saying, lay down your swords and go with the king of Babylon. Jesus is saying here it's going to be even worse. This is the final destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. This is it. And so get out of here. Go flee Judea. Run to the mountains. And so we looked at that a lot last time. But what's interesting about this is exactly the picture of Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, I'm coming to tell you this is coming, and it's not going to delay. So you need to get out of here. Don't delay. And he's already been telling them, I've told you all the things beforehand, so that when it happens, you know it's time to go. Don't stick around. When you persevere, or in some of the versions, when you obey my words, not a hair of your head's going to be taken. You'll be fine, but you got to listen to what I'm saying. But I want you to think about this for a second, because this is really, really hard news. It would be hard for them to imagine leaving behind the temple, leaving behind the holy city, just like it was hard for Lot and his wife to leave behind Sodom and Gomorrah. It was everything they knew. And this is even more poignant because this is the temple of God. And so Jesus spent some time warning them. There are people who are going to come and say that I'm lying. And these false Christs are going to come and try to get you to stick around and get you to defend the temple. But I'm telling you what the sign is. And when you see it, don't stick around. They may be telling you it's not going to happen, but if you see armies coming to Jerusalem, get out. Heed my words, or you will die. That's how hard this is, and that's how important it is. So when you see the sign, that's the time to go. But then he gives them a timestamp. And I love this. Both of y'all sort of intimated this, but I want to make it more a harder punch here. He says, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. He had told them, when you see these signs, get out of town. The idea is it's something they're going to be able to witness. He's not looking at some distant generations, thousands of years in the future. Think about how pointless that would even be. He's scaring them. He's stirring them up. He's saying these are going to be disastrous things, but you don't worry about it. That's for 2,000 years in the future. That's not what he said. He said, you need to be worried about this. You need to be working in the middle of this. It's going to be tough. And you need to be preparing people. The warning is for that generation. And to come along and say his message is referring to 2025 or beyond just absolutely disregards the context. You can't do that. Are there things that Jesus wrote and said that have an application further on? Sure. And when there is, even this will have an application. The principle has an application. But if we miss what the original use was, we can't make a proper application later anyway. Think about, we may have talked about this, but think about like Noah's Ark. Why am I not building an ark in my backyard? Well, that wasn't for me. But do I learn something from the account of Noah's Ark? Absolutely. It was written for my learning. I learned the importance of obeying what God says, even when it sounds impossible. It sounds like that's absurd. It's not going to rain. It's never rained. Well, all of a sudden, when the rain came, he was glad he built the ark, and everybody else who started to believe wished they could be on it, but it was too late. He obeyed without seeing. That's what faith is. Faith is conviction of things that are unseen. And so he's telling them here, they will see these things. And he's giving them signs, but it's going to be for later on. Not that much later on, though. I want you to think about the fact that he says, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. We have to admit that at the very least, these things that he's speaking about are the things he's mentioned up until this verse when he says these things, right? When he says these things will happen. So some people try to make a distinction. He says these things here, and then there's more stuff to come. But at least these things up through verse 29 are included. Let me just make a quick list of what he's already said is going to happen in that generation. Many will come in my name. It's not some antichrist that's coming at the end of time. Many would come in his name at that generation. There would be wars and rumors of wars. There would be nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That's in verse 8. Earthquakes and famines and all these events, these catastrophic events. That's also in verse 8. They would deliver you up to councils and kick you out of the synagogues. That's also in verse 9. The gospel will be proclaimed to all nations. That's in verse 10. That had to happen. These things would take place in that generation. The abomination of desolation that he mentioned. That's in verse 14. That's before this. That's going to happen. That's these things you're going to see. That you're going to flee to the mountains would be in that generation. The sun, the moon, and the stars would all be shaken, and the heavens would be shaken. and the Son of Man would come in clouds with the angels that gathered the elect. All of that, he said, is going to take place in this generation. It is not the end of the world. It is not some future event. It is stuff in that generation.
There's also the one in 19. There's going to be such a tribulation has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now and never will be. So he's talking about in that time period, in that generation, while some of them are still alive, all of those things you just mentioned are going to happen. Plus this, I'll put in the word great tribulation. He says
Right.
such tribulation had not ever seen from the beginning, nor will there. So when people say that, well, the tribulation that happened in the first century doesn't compare to the future one after our time. Wait a minute, Jesus said there ain't going to be other one. This is it.
Yeah, and they get 7 years in there somewhere. I recently was studying. I just asked somebody, show me the 7 years. Well, you have to go to Thessalonians. I said, well, it's not in Thessalonians either. Where are you getting your 7 years of tribulation in this text?
And
Keep in the context and show me.
most people don't even recognize that great tribulation as the tribulation that took place then. They just think it's future. They don't take into place. And if Josephus mentions all this stuff,
yeah,
that's taking place in that generation. That's your history right there, tying that in. And it was great too. You made the point. You went back and read all those signs and the desolation. That was 14, I think. And then in that, where is it again? Was that verse
19 that the tribulation is where you're going? That's what I brought up.
And then 29. 20,
Oh,
so that shows us we're staying within the context, because 29. So also when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. That's referring to the armies, is it not?
Yeah, I think the point is that's when this moment's going to be.
Right.
And the reference on this, I'm reading from the English Standard. Both times they put he is near or he is coming. It's a reference that's neutral. Actually, it could be an it, and most of the other translations actually an it.
Yep.
And so the problem is the word is gender masculine, so you can translate it he or it, and they chose to choose he here. I think that's even leading in somewhat. It's an interpretive issue. If you read those both as it, you're not thinking of a person like an antichrist who's going to come. It may be that it's Jesus who's coming is why they put he here. But whatever the reason and whatever the purpose, these are the things that would happen in that generation, up to and including the coming of the abomination of desolation. This is not a future tribulation. It's that tribulation. And when a thief comes in the night and does everything and it's gone, there's not tribulation associated with that either. Like you lost some stuff, but it wasn't tribulation. It was a surprise. He showed up and then he was gone. Usually you wake up and realize everything's gone when a thief comes in the night. It's not that he comes and then you confront him. So the language that deals with the end of the world, we'll look at this in our last study on this. I don't want to get too much into it today, but the language that deals with the end of the world is a much more permanent language and is much more public language. This is a private conversation. These people are going to take this message out, but the stuff he's saying here is given to 4 apostles to start with. When he's talking about the end of the world, he just publishes it. He sends it to everybody. It's into all the ones in the diaspora, or make sure everybody else reads this letter too, he says, when he talks about it in Thessalonians. So there's a huge distinction. But he's talking about all these things that would happen in that generation. And what's amazing is the grace of God involved in this issue, because he's speaking around the year 29 or 30, whatever year it was actually that Jesus was crucified. There is some discrepancy on that. The temple was destroyed AD 70. That would be 40 years after this conversation, or at the very end of this generation. He is giving a generation of Jews an opportunity to hear this message and believe it and teach their families that they can hear it and believe it, and then get out of there before the temple is destroyed. What great grace God is giving. As you said, Josephus tells us millions of Jews were slaughtered because they didn't get out. They went in and tried to defend the temple, and God had decreed its destruction, and the destruction of those ultimately who had rejected Jesus as the Christ. Their destruction was just. Now, it sounds harsh to us to say that, but it was a judgment on the Jewish nation for rejecting and murdering the Son of God. When Peter preached that in Acts 2, the ones who were convicted recognized, we've murdered the Son of God. What do we do? And they repented. But there were many more who did not and kept troubling them and said, quit dragging this man's blood all over us. That's what they kept saying. You're trying to make this man's blood be on our hands. Well, it was. So learn the lesson of the fig tree. When you see summer is coming, you prepare for summer. When you see this sign coming that these armies are surrounding Jerusalem, get out of there. But then he says something else. After he gives them this firm conviction that it's time to run, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. And people say, aha, you see, he changed subjects. Now he's talking about the end of the world. That's not what he's doing here. He didn't say heaven and earth are going to pass away at this moment when this happened. Again, does that make any sense to run to the mountains if heaven and earth are passing away?
Right.
No. What he said was, and listen carefully, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. That's the connection. There is something more solid than the universe, this physical universe, than we inhabit. It's the word of God. In fact, Hebrews tells us the universe was made by the word of God, and that it's upheld by the word of Christ. So the word is more powerful and more certain than the universe that it upholds. And so all through the Old Testament, you get this idea, the grass fades, the flower withers, but the word of God is forever. You get these concepts over and over. In fact, Moses calls heaven and earth as witness to the words of the covenant because they'll be there long after the people will, but even heaven and earth eventually are going to be dissolved and the word will still remain. Drew, do you have a comment on that?
I was going to say that verse 31, heaven and earth will pass away. That's not a timestamp. That's just a fact.
It's in this case, it's just a comparison to how firm his word is.
Right.
What's the most firm thing we can think of? I had a friend that used to say, I'll bet on the sun rising tomorrow. If somebody wants to bet me on it. Like, it's the most firm thing there is, but I'll take that bet. Maybe I'll win. Like, the sun one day is going to burn out. It's not going to be there.
And that's my point. So it's not talking about a timestamp. It's just saying that's a fact. Heaven and earth will pass away someday, but my words are not. And I think what you're saying here, unless I misunderstood you, that's the comparison he's making, that the words I'm telling you, you can count on.
Yes.
That's primarily the principal thing in that verse. Is that true?
That's absolutely it. And it's not new. It's something that he's been doing all through the Old Testament. God speaks this way.
I want to make sure that I'm not trying to make it fit a preconceived idea.
Yeah. He's not telling them that in that moment, heaven and earth are going to pass away. What he's telling them is, what I'm telling you is more certain than heaven and earth.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Right.
And it's that certainty that gives his servants confidence to act. If your boss is kind of like, well, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do that, you don't know what to do. When your master is telling his servants, this is what's going to happen, and here's what I need you to do, you know exactly what to do and you can act. When you don't have any idea, you don't even know how to prepare. He is telling them, you're going to be persecuted. These things are going to happen. And here's the sign that you'll know when the persecution has reached its culmination and everybody needs to get out of here. The apostles stayed for a long time in Jerusalem teaching. And I think it's fitting. We may have mentioned this last time too, but I want to really bring this up here. I think it's so fitting that in Acts chapter 7, Stephen is stoned for preaching that Jesus is going to take away this place, our nation, and this place, the holy city and the holy temple. That's why they stoned him. Why is he preaching that? Because this message has now gone from the apostles down to these deacons, these other preachers that are there, and they're warning the people. And the Jewish leadership keeps saying, don't listen to these men. And they're saying, you need to listen, because not only do you need to follow Christ and move outside of this area to the true temple, which is us and not this building, you need to get out before the Romans come in and destroy this place. We're going to see in a minute he didn't give them the day. So they didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen in their generation. And so they're preparing. And that's what Stephen stoned for a few years after Jesus' resurrection. I think it's fascinating that he's still talking about that, because that was part of the major message early on until that happened. So Jesus' words are more certain than heaven and earth. And then he says, concerning that day or that hour, I want you to notice how I read that, because that's not the way most people read it. Because he said before, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. People read this by saying, but concerning that day or that hour, which the day that heaven and earth pass away, that's not what he said. He's still talking about the same day and hour, the day and hour that this destruction comes on Jerusalem. Concerning that day or that hour, no one knows. I'm not telling you. They requested a sign. He gave them a sign. He didn't give them the exact hour. what's amazing is what he's done through this whole section, and really how he'll end it when we look at our last couple of lessons next time. Really how he'll end it is preparing them to be ready, because they don't know when the hour is. And I want you to notice that Jesus did the exact same thing in the first chapter of the book of Acts. What he tells them is the time that God has determined to do his stuff, that's not important. What's important is you working until that moment comes. So in Acts chapter 1, they have had the privilege of walking with Jesus for 40 days after his resurrection. That's what Luke is telling us in Acts chapter 1. And they're asking him things about the kingdom because they're confused. But they know for sure now this is the king and he can't die. So he's got an eternal kingdom. And he's resurrected at this point, right? So they're asking him, is this it? Is this the moment? And it is, but they wouldn't understand it. So watch what Jesus does. I just love this text. It's Acts 1, verses 6 through 9. So when they had come together, they asked him, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? He said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons that the Father has fixed by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. You see what Jesus did? Don't worry about the times. God will take care of that. You got work to do. Go do your work. That's exactly what he did here. They were worried about this. When is this going to happen? He said, let me tell you first. Don't follow false teachers, and you go preach the gospel to every nation. Now, here's the sign when it's going to happen. And once they've run, he says, now let's go back and talk about this. I'm not going to tell you exactly when it's going to be. I've given you the sign. You got work to do. Don't worry about the exact hour. And really, his exact hour, not giving the exact hour is a great blessing. And we'll talk about that, God willing, in our next one. But I think it's important to understand these three things that trip people up. He says, this generation will not pass away. So he can't be talking about some generation 2,000 years in the future. Now, there's a lot of theological dancing that goes on to make it say that. You know, with God, 1,000 years is as a day, and a day is as 1,000 years. So it's really just 2 days away. It's still the same generation. No, that's ridiculous. That's not what Jesus is doing here. He's talking about their generation. And then this bit about heaven and earth passing, but not my word. He's not saying this is the moment heaven and earth pass away. Again, in the context, it makes no sense. He's telling them to run, but why run if heaven and earth are passing away? That's not his point. What's his point is, my word is true. Trust it. And they always have, but they just need to. And then finally, I'm not going to tell you the time, but I have given you the sign. Look for the sign and run when the sign comes. Until then, get your work done. Be busy. So we'll see at the end of this text, and we'll wrap up in our next lesson. He'll tell them about what it looks like for them being busy and why that's important.
Wow. That's so he's giving them the signs. They just don't know exactly where the hands of the clock are going to be on what hour.
Exactly.
Give them the signs, look for them, which that requires faith.
Absolutely.
Keep looking. Oh, all of a sudden they start seeing things. The Roman army starting to come in. That's what the Lord was talking about. Mm-hmm. You can imagine their hearts starting to pump faster, and whoa, we're getting closer.
Yeah, they were used to seeing soldiers around. They had a police force, as it were, but they weren't used to armies taking over the city of Jerusalem. Yeah. And so when that begins to happen, the political Jews especially are going to think they have a right to defend that, and that they will appeal to Caesar about it, that we've got a right for this. It's Caesar who's sending them in. Jesus is saying, by the way, it's him that's sending them in. This is his destruction on Jerusalem. He's the one who's coming in the clouds in judgment. And so he's going to use the Roman army to execute his judgment, but he's the one doing it. And again, that is not a new concept, even when Jesus says that. That's exactly what Habakkuk faced and was like, how can God bring Babylon? They're horrible. How can you bring Rome? They're horrible. This is God judging someone he deemed more horrible. His own people in both cases were being judged because they had rejected him.
And when they see, when you as a people, when we as a people see what God did to us under the history that we saw in Babylon, you realize. Now, in that case, they were being punished because of their idolatry. They went over to the dark side. But that tells you you're going to be destroyed if you go against God, even if you're his own child. Today, now, during this time, they should have recognized that. And as the signs started coming up, they should have remembered back, wow, yeah, God went against us back then. And now we're starting to see these signs. Let's wake up. That's what we're supposed to do as people. We're to wake up.
Yeah. And that'll really be the gist of how Jesus is going to finish this. Like I said before, there's a specific context for this, but at the very end, he's going to say, now the application of this is for everybody. So what I'm going to tell you is what everybody needs to hear. But he's telling them first because they asked about it, and he's giving them the details. They're going to share the details later. But all of this right now, remember at the end of John, he tells them, I've got many more things to tell you, but you can't bear it now. When the Spirit comes, he will reveal to you all things. From John 14, 15, and 16, he's preparing them to receive the Spirit, who will guide them into the rest of the truth that he just can't tell them right now. If he had told them in Acts 1, oh yeah, I'm going to restore the kingdom, they would have taken their wrong ideas and tried to build a physical kingdom. When they got the Spirit and went out preaching that we are a temple not made with hands and that our King is ruling over our hearts, not over some physical realm, that kingdom was established. And it's exactly what Jesus wanted. But we have to trust him at his word.
Appreciate it. I look forward to our next session when we get into some of those next points.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to bring out next time. We'll look at the purpose for him not telling the hour, and then we'll make this distinction between the end of a city or the end of the world. I think it'll be important to look at those.
Beautiful. Okay. I guess that's it for tonight, right?
I think so. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, let's close right there. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Kenny. Good seeing both of you, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.